Thanks for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Ephraim Graham.
And I'm Charlene Aaron. Middle East violence is escalating after Hamas launched rockets deep inside Israel. Those rockets reached major Israeli cities, putting most of Israel's civilian population within range. The Israeli military is striking back at Hamas targets in Gaza, trying to stop the rocket fire. Chris Mitchell has the story.
Israelis in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem ran for shelter as sirens warned of incoming rockets from Gaza. Terrorists launched a salvo of 45 rockets at major Israeli cities, reaching as far as the coastal town of Hadera, north of Tel Aviv. That's about 70 miles from Gaza, further north than ever before. The missile was the same kind that Israel intercepted earlier this year on a shipment from Iran to the Gaza Strip. 17 of the missiles fired overnight were intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome anti-missile defense. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said no other country would endure such a barrage of rockets. He said in recent days, Hamas terrorists have fired hundreds of rockets at Israel's civilians. No other country lives under such a threat, and no country would accept such a threat. Israel will not tolerate the firing of rockets on our cities and towns. Israel said it tried to negotiate a ceasefire.
We tried to de-escalate. Messages were sent. We told Hamas to stop this rocket fire, but they continued. And now we are acting. The Israeli Defense Forces are acting to bring about a situation where the people of Israel no longer have to live in fear.
Meanwhile, the government authorized the IDF to call up as many as 40,000 reserve soldiers if needed. A smaller amount have already been called up as Israel mulls a ground invasion into Gaza. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Iraqi officials say Islamic terrorists captured a huge former chemical weapons site. The facility northwest of Baghdad held chemical warfare agents, including 2,500 chemical rockets from the 1990s. They were filled with the deadly nerve agent sarin. An Iraqi official says Iraq is now unable to fulfill its obligation to destroy chemical weapons. The radical group called the Islamic State controls large parts of Syria and Iraq. It is unclear if they now possess any active chemical weapons.
Deadly storms have moved through the northeastern part of the U.S., killing at least 5 people, including a child. In central New York, 4 people were killed in the town of Smithfield when several homes were destroyed. Residents are searching the community to make sure no one is trapped underneath collapsed homes. In Marion, New York, people are calling their neighborhood a war zone.
We were standing there, it started raining, it started getting a little windy, and then almost instantly something was here. I'm still a little shaky from it. It was numbing, very numbing.
It was insane. I mean, looked out the window and just saw blankets of rain and just trees falling everywhere. And the rain came and then it was just over with in the blink of an eye.
In Carroll County, Maryland, a tree fell at a summer camp, killing 1 child and injuring 6 others. Many residents have been left without power after the surprise storm downed power lines and trees.
The politics over immigration are coming to a head in Texas. President Obama is meeting with chief critic Governor Rick Perry and others to discuss the crisis. That as tensions mount across the country over temporary housing for immigrants. The president won't go to the border, but he is meeting with Texas Governor Rick Perry, as well as faith leaders and other Texas officials, to discuss the immigration crisis. Perry, a possible presidential candidate in 2016, has blasted the White House in recent days, saying it has failed to respond to his warnings about the flood of immigrant children.
This is a failure of diplomacy. It is a failure of leadership from the administration in Washington, D.C.
The administration also has to contend right now with backlash from communities that want no part in temporarily housing immigrant children. In Marietta, California, protesters stood outside a Border Patrol facility Tuesday and spoke out against processing immigrants there.
We just want the uncontrolled, unchecked illegal immigration to be controlled.
Last week, a group of protesters in Marietta forced a bus carrying immigrants to turn around. In League City, Texas, the city council received applause after it passed a resolution forbidding the federal government from housing immigrant children in the city.
Fears is that we'll get 1,000 kids here in League City where are they going to be housed? I think our school system will be required to educate them, enroll them in schools.
In other communities like this one outside a naval base in California, the views are more mixed, especially after a tour of a facility currently housing immigrant children.
When I saw these kids, I saw myself. When I saw these kids and they were smiling, I knew that they're scared and that they're alone. And as a parent, sometimes you have to make difficult decisions.
Congress now has a difficult decision to make: how much to spend to secure the border and process the children who've already crossed. The president is asking for $3.7 billion in emergency spending. Already, more than 50,000 children have crossed the border this year, and as many as 90,000 are expected by year's end. That White House spending request includes $1.1 billion for border security, as well as funds for immigration judges and facilities to care for unaccompanied immigrant children.
The federal government shelled out $100 billion in payments to people who should not have received them last year. And congressional investigators say that figure could climb. Medicare payments account for half of the mismanaged money, but there are also tax credits given to families that didn't qualify, unemployment benefits given to people who had jobs, and medical payments made for unnecessary treatments.
Whistleblowers in the scandal involving Veterans Hospitals say they suffered retaliation from their superiors. A watchdog agency says 67 of those employees who filed complaints were harassed by supervisors. The complaints were filed in 28 states at 45 separate facilities. The harassment complaints were revealed Tuesday night at a hearing before the House Veterans Affairs Committee. A top VA official has apologized to employees who reported wrongdoings, that they were mistreated.
Democrats in the Senate are trying to override the Supreme Court's ruling which exempted some companies from Obamacare's birth control mandate. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid says the ruling was outrageous. The Senate aims at undoing the ruling by passing legislation that would force companies with religious objections to provide contraception coverage, including what some groups view as abortion-inducing drugs. The bill would still have to pass the Republican-controlled House.
A former Kentucky bank teller is suing her employer for allegedly firing her for saying, "Have a blessed day." Polly Neese worked for U.S. Bank in Walton, Kentucky for more than 20 years. For 2 years, she told customers, "Have a blessed day." In 2011, the bank told her she could no longer say the phrase, and she was later fired. She is now suing the bank for firing her because of her religious beliefs. U.S. Bank disputes that claim. It says some customers had complained about Neese's greeting and that after repeated warnings, she continued to say it.
Polly Neese and her attorneys join us now by Skype. Now, Polly, telling customers to have a blessed day was the norm for you. Why was it important to say it?
Well, I had heard it in 2009, and it made my day. And I thought, what a wonderful thing to say to folks as they're on their way out, just to wish them the best kind of day that you could have.
Excellent. Did you ever hear of any complaints about saying the phrase?
No, ma'am. As a matter of fact, if I didn't tell customers to have a blessed day, they would ask me, well, what happened to have a blessed day?
Awesome. Well, Polly, the bank also says you talked to a customer about salvation. Tell us about that incident.
Well, there was a situation where a customer had come into the bank, and I asked him to sign the check, and he took the Lord's name in vain. He did it not once, but he did it twice. I asked him to not do that. That was the worst thing that my ears could hear. That went straight to my heart. And, you know, he wasn't offended. He, as a matter of fact, told me to have a blessed weekend before he left.
Jeff, Polly is suing the bank because she says it terminated her because of her religious beliefs. The bank denies that claim. What's your take on it?
Actually, the evidence is quite clear that first she was disciplined for saying have a blessed day. That's in writing. There's no way to dispute that. And then she quit saying have a blessed day because she was told to. However, she also filed an Equal Employment Opportunity Commission complaint on the grounds that she had been discriminated against based on her religion. From that point forward, different little things would happen, and she was given a rough time by a new assistant manager. She met with her manager about this rough time with this assistant manager on one particular day. And in that conversation, Polly said, you know, I might as well go back to telling people to have a blessed day. She was frustrated and wanted to have her right to say, have a blessed day. That's what her EEOC complaint was all about. The day after she said that to her manager, she was fired.
Randy, do employees have to leave their religious freedom at the door when they go to work?
No, they don't. As a matter of fact, the law is very clear that an employer has to make a reasonable accommodation to an employee's religious beliefs. So, for example, in this case, if somebody really was offended by her saying, have a blessed day, all they need to do is go to her and say, Polly, don't say it to that person. But they refused to do that. In fact, they even refused to tell her who the person was who was offended. And in fact, in the depositions we've taken, they've been unable to identify a single customer who actually complained.
What do you think this case might do for employees concerned about their right to express their faith at work?
I think this case will help establish that the law is that they do have to accommodate the religious beliefs. They can't just engage in blanket prohibitions of religious expression. The employer here said that not only could she not say have a blessed day, that she was never to mention God or religion in the workplace at all. And they said, for example, if she wore a necklace with a cross on it, she would have to hide the cross, since she couldn't show that they wanted a God-free workplace is what they told her, which I think is ironic that they want a God-free workplace, but they're passing out money that says, in God we trust.
Well, Polly Neese, Randy, and Jeff Blankenship, thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, another case of political correctness run amok. This man arrested just for quoting Winston Churchill. Hear what he said that caused the Brits to get their knickers in a twist. The U.S. House of Representatives has approved a 5-year renewal of the Commission on International Religious Freedom. The independent bipartisan commission reports on violation of religious rights abroad. It recommends actions the U.S. could take against countries that persecute or fail to prevent persecution of people of faith. The renewal is still pending the Senate's approval. Congressman Randy Hultgren says the case of Miriam Ibrahim in Sudan proves the need for this commission. Miriam was sentenced to death for refusing to recant her Christian faith. She remains in legal limbo at the U.S. Embassy in Sudan.
Heavily armed Muslim fighters attacked a Catholic church in the Central African Republic, killing at least 17 people and leaving 10 others seriously wounded. The church compound was sheltering thousands of civilians. Officials say the attack occurred Monday when the fighters accused church officials of helping Christian militias operating in the area. Last week, a grenade attack on a mosque left 34 people wounded.
Could you imagine being arrested just because you quoted a statement about Islam from a great leader like Winston Churchill? It sounds like something too bizarre even for Hollywood.
But it did happen, and in Churchill's very own country, Britain. As Dale Hurd reports, some people in Britain believe they're losing their freedom of speech.
British police make an arrest. The crime? Publicly reading the words of Winston Churchill about Islam. It may be 2014, but in Britain today it might as well be 1984, because Big Brother has decided that certain things can no longer be said. Paul Weston was arrested for quoting from Winston Churchill's book, The River War.
How dreadful are the curses which Islam lays on its votaries, besides the fanatical frenzy, which is as dangerous in a man as hydrophobia in a dog.
As a young officer, Churchill fought Muslim jihadists in the Sudan and believed that Islam was a dangerous religion. Weston chose to publicly quote Churchill because he knew that in today's politically correct Britain, comparing Islam to rabies, as Churchill did, would likely get him reported to police and arrested. It did.
So I wanted to make the point there that if it's really become so bad in this country that you cannot quote the words of the greatest living Englishman, then we really need to look seriously about what we can still say in this country.
Pastors, street evangelists, and political activists have all been hauled into police stations and either been arrested or warned for speaking out against topics like Islam, immigration, or sin.
The speech issue is incredibly important. You know, we don't have your First Amendment, and speech is rapidly becoming a no-go area if you talk about certain issues. We are living in an absolute madhouse in this country with our free speech laws at the moment.
What's interesting is there seems to be so little concern about the loss of freedom of speech here, which means most of society has decided that there are certain things a person shouldn't be allowed to say. British evangelical pastor James McConnell was questioned by Belfast police after this controversial sermon about the threat to Britain from radical Islam.
Islam is heathen. Islam is satanic. Islam is a doctrine spawned in hell.
McConnell said he went to the police station voluntarily and he apologized. But should he have had to? George Igler of the Discourse Institute.
He's expressing a view about a particular religion. You can't have freedom of religion without freedom to have views, religious views about particular religions.
British pastors have to watch what they say. Although Simon Calvert of the Christian Institute, a legal defense organization, assured us that British pastors are still able to preach the whole Bible and not be arrested. But he added,
there have been some distinct problems in recent years. We have seen a number of cases, typically involving street preachers, of people being told by the police, effectively, you can't say that.
American street evangelist Tony Miana was arrested in Scotland earlier this year for allegedly using offensive language while preaching.
Every person who engages in sexual immorality knows that it is wrong, because God has given them a conscience.
Police eventually dropped the charges. Police also dropped the charges against Paul Weston, but arrests and warnings still have what legal experts call a chilling effect on free speech. Calvert says the speech situation in Britain improved greatly this year with the reform of the Public Order Act, in which insulting someone could be a criminal offence.
So we had on the statute book here in the UK a law against insults, which is every bit as crazy as it sounds. And that law against insults was being used to clamp down on street preachers preaching the gospel.
The law against insult was removed, but other laws against offending people remain.
We've made such a big deal out of causing offence.
Anne-Marie Waters heads Sharia Watch UK.
Self-censorship is a big problem in Britain. People are afraid to speak, so in that respect, freedom of speech has been seriously compromised.
The experts we talked to disagreed about whether Britain still has free speech. Calvert says yes. Igler says no.
We are ultimately moving towards a situation where necessarily the state will have to tell us what kind of opinions are acceptable and what kind of opinions are not.
Paul Weston says he will continue to test Britain's speech laws to show that speech in Britain is no longer free.
You are not going to shut me up. I am going to say it. If you put me in prison, fine. Now, this is how bad it is now.
Dale Hurd, CBN News, London.
Up next, they're treated as outcasts, locked out from society. How CBN opened doors for this family and put life-changing tools in their hands. In many cultures, gypsies are considered social outcasts, so it's hard for them to find work outside their villages.
And that's why CBN is helping gypsy families in Ukraine start businesses of their own.
For generations, gypsy families in Ukraine have lived in a cycle of poverty. Christina's life has been filled with need and hunger.
Everything is so hard here. When I get older and have children, I really want more for them. I don't want them to experience what I went through.
So she works hard in school and wants to get a good job one day.
I realized in the 6th grade what I want to become a hairdresser when I grow up. I asked my parents to pay for my hairdressing courses, but they said we didn't have enough money for food, let alone extra classes.
Christina goes to a church supported by CBN. She gave her life to Christ and is now in one of the worship groups.
I keep asking God to help make my dreams come true.
At one of our summer camps in Ukraine, Christina met a volunteer who was teaching people to cut hair. She realized Christina has a natural talent for this kind of work.
Thousands of gypsy families live in camps like this in western Ukraine. Considered social outcasts by society, it's very difficult for them to find work outside the camp. That's why we're helping Christina to learn job skills she can use right here in her own community.
We knew Christina could succeed on her own, so we bought her all the tools she needed to start her own business. Now she's earning extra money for her family. And we helped her family start farming potatoes.
Because of you, we're no longer hungry. I dreamed of being a hairdresser for a long time, and now it's reality. Thank you so much for helping us.
The smile on her face says it all.
I tell you, CBN at work around the world. You can find out more at cbn.com. We'll be right back.
Finally today, the oldest person in America says trusting in the Lord is a key reason for living so long.
Gertrude Weaver of Arkansas turned 116 on the 4th of July. She spent her birthday at home at Silver Oaks Health and Rehabilitation in Camden. That's about 100 miles southwest of Little Rock. Weaver gives 3 reasons for her longevity: trusting in God, trusting in the Lord, hard work, and loving everybody. And she says you have to follow God. Don't follow anyone else. Great advice.
Excellent advice. And she looked amazing. 116.
God bless you.
God bless her. Well, that's it for now on CBN News Today. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com.
Take the time to tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do it on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Make it a wonderful Wednesday, everybody.